in the past year. We did the best we could to make things work, learned new skills, and stayed home. We missed the times when we could fly to fun places painted with color, where we could share meaningful moments, moments of peace and laughter. Our country has a lot to offer. And Cebu Pacific has been helping people live their adventures for 25 years. Now, it's time for everyone to fly again. Fly safely, travel responsibly, for more smiles ahead.
Maayong adlaw kanatong tanan. My name is Jude Bacalso, coming to you live from Cebu City. I should say good morning, good noon, or good evening, wherever it is you are in the world. And I purposely wore my wings today because I'm ready to take off with Philippine travel together with Cebu Pacific Air. And joining us as we take off today are Cebu Pacific Air's Vice President for Marketing and Customer Experience, Candice Iyog, Cebu Pacific Air's Chief Strategy Officer, Alex Reyes, and the Department of Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo-Puyat. I'd like to say hello to everyone. Kumusta po kayo? Maayo ba karong buntaga? Nga nagtanaw nato karon diri. We are also joined by our Philippine-based media partners from the Department of Tourism and the Tourism Promotions Board. We're joined by partners from national tourism organizations, industry partners, key travel and trade partners in the Philippines, and as I said, wherever you are in the world, our key international partners. I just want to reach out to you. I know there are a lot of us joining this program today. Very quickly, we're going to flash a Zoom poll, and you can answer it once it flashes right there, not at your chat box, but at the Zoom poll, okay? I'd like to know, first of all, question number one, we're going to flash it. Were you able to travel in 2021? I know that for a lot of us, the answer, if I asked if you were able to travel in 2020, was no. But as restrictions eased up in 2021, you were probably able to get on a plane. I personally have not been on a plane, but I have traveled just to cross the Bantayan Island here in Cebu. We're going to see how many percent of us joining here have traveled in 2021. I'm intrigued on also where you went, but for just for this one, answer me this question. Were you able to travel in 2021? I'd like to know. And we'd like to see you answering that on your polls right now. No prize for this one, but we're giving out prizes, of course, later on, as we're used to here in Cebu Pacific Air. But a very simple question. Were you able to travel in 2021? Like I said, I haven't. I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing that everyone will fly again and there are more smiles ahead. So we're waiting for the results of that poll. Loving my wings today. And they asked me to wear something yellow. I guess the gold in my hair and the jewelry will suffice for that. We have the results of the poll. Thank you for answering. 63%, that's overwhelming, actually said yes, I envy you. And only 37%, which would include me, said no. Next question. Okay, I want to know if yes, for those who answered yes, where did you travel to? I was only able to travel to, like I mentioned earlier, right before the lockdown started, I was able to cross the sea from mainland Cebu to Bantayan Island. And I think it was 2 months ago, I was also in Oslob, Cebu, which is down south. So Bantayan is up north. I also went down south. I was on assignment for the New York Times. I produced a story for them, which landed on the cover. It was a little controversial. Um, we actually visited the town to find out how the whale shark interaction was going and thriving or surviving during the pandemic. All right, you've answered our questions. If yes, for those who answered yes, top three. Our top three for this question is actually Manila, Boracay, and my hometown, Cebu. Thank you. I hope that was both for pleasure as well as for business, because I think when things are easing up, of course, business would be the very first reason for travel, and then leisure next. But the thing is, when I was in Oslob, and this was straight out of easing up of restrictions, there were already a lot of non-Cebuanos traveling there. So still domestic travelers, I assume from Manila, and there were some from Pampanga who were in Cebu. Question number three, just very quickly. If not, for those who answered no, we weren't able to travel, just like myself, what destinations are you looking forward to visit soon? And we have some choices that we put on our poll. You can choose Aklan, that's in Boracay, Bohol, Cagayan de Oro, Cebu, Clark, Davao, General Santos City, Manila, Palawan, and Siargao. And that coincides, of course, with the destinations that have eased of restrictions and that you can visit both for pleasure and for business. So we're waiting for the result on that. Question number three, our top three for those who have not traveled and are looking forward to doing so. It's Siargao. I haven't been in a while, and I'm dreaming of that as well. Just like a lot of you, Palawan would be second on that, and Boracay. All three require swimsuit, and I'm also looking forward to traveling to Baguio because I like the cold. Thank you for answering the poll. Flashed on your screens, we have spent almost 2 years in a quarantine. But the good news is we're only 18 days away from Christmas. We're doing a countdown. Oh, yes, we are guilty of that. 18 days till Christmas. We have all had our ups and downs during the past months. We are slowly making our way to recovery. We have seen growth in terms of performance this year versus, obviously, in 2020, where the lockdowns were at their peak. As the year comes to a close, we are excited to share with all of you our milestones and our victories that paved the way for the steady recovery of the Philippine travel industry. Cebu Pacific now flies to more domestic and international destinations, and it continues to work with local stakeholders as we've always had. This year and in the years to come, as more destinations are opening safely for travel, we'll also be seeing hashtag more smiles ahead from everyone. And with that, let's hear from the chief pilot of Cebu Pacific himself, our president and CEO, Mr. Lance Gokongwei.
This year, we mark 25 years of enabling everyone to fly. And we are especially pleased to end 2021 with significant improvements. The year 2021 has been just as eventful as our 25-year journey. Only this time, it's not just for us, but for everyone living amidst this pandemic. 2021 also highlighted how goals can be met if all stakeholders continuously work together towards a shared purpose. The pandemic allowed us to become agile across our business. The SEV flight network kept up with the fluidity of the situation, along with our roster of products and services. We took this as an opportunity to innovate and accelerate the transformation of our airline to make sure your experience with us remains safe and easy. We also championed vaccination for the whole Gokongwei group, as we believed it is the key in enabling everyone to live through our new normal and in turn help our entire economy recover. All that we do are anchored upon our core purpose, which is to provide safe, affordable, and accessible air transportation services for the Filipino people. The pandemic gave birth to a new way of doing things, including air travel. Finding the right balance for our industry has been challenging, But we are pleased to end the year on a high note as we see more destinations ease travel restrictions and open up the borders for easier and safer travel. And this enables us to add more flights for everyone as well. Despite the pandemic, we pushed through with the delivery of a number of new aircraft, one of which is our first ever Airbus 330 Neo, because we are confident that the economy and tourism will recover. We are optimistic that demand will continue to increase, and we want everyone to know that Cebu Pacific is more than ready to fly you safely to your desired destinations. We remain committed to serve you with utmost safety, convenience, and fun in every flight. And we thank you for your continued support, trust, and confidence as we endeavor to grow and make our service the best possible. Here's to painting the skies yellow again as we look forward to hashtag more smiles ahead with everyone in 2022.
Salamat, Mr. Lance, for that very inspiring message. I look forward to painting the skies yellow again. We look forward to bumping into you very soon in one of the Cebu Pacific flights. I personally have never bumped into him. I don't know if I should introduce myself to him, but I kind of know that he would be the kind of guy who would acknowledge you even if he doesn't remember you, but I'll make sure to send you a picture of myself. Before we continue, I would like to inform everyone that you can send in your questions to our panelists in the Q&A chat box on your Zoom. At any time, we'll be reading them out, of course, when we open our question and answer portion later after the panel is done with their presentations. We'll ask some of them for you during our panel discussion, or we can always share them to the panelists if it was not covered in the panel discussion, so they can answer it for you if needed. Now, to discuss updates in line with various destinations are slowly, and I'd like to say safely, opening for leisure travel. Leisure travel in 2021, and how Cebu Pacific is bouncing back and taking part in restarting Philippine travel. We have our Chief Strategy Officer for Cebu Pacific, Alex Reyes.
Good morning to the SEB community. Thank you to all of you for attending today's short event. Now, we have some good news to share, and we thought it would be very timely to meet before the end of the year to update everyone on these positive developments. So let's dive straight into it. First, let's review what a tumultuous year it's been for air travel and why today, as we speak, we are cautiously optimistic. What we see from consumers today is that there is growing confidence to travel again. The concerns of consumers have shifted markedly this year. No? So back in April, when we were in the midst of another COVID surge, travelers were quite concerned about their safety and security. And we saw that many travelers were postponing their travel plans. And there was indeed a large reluctance among consumers to purchase air tickets. What consumers were telling us earlier in the year was that no matter how affordable we would make flights, many of them would be reluctant to make a purchase because the various measures that the Philippines was putting in place to cope with COVID created really this climate of concern. No? Now, in our most recent surveys, those safety and security considerations have receded, and consumers are now mostly back to thinking about whether travel restrictions or travel requirements are in place for them to complete their travel. No? Affordability is also now in among the top 3 concerns, which is something that Cebu Pacific can address really, really well. It's part and parcel of our business model. Now, affordability is something that is very dear to our hearts. Our reason for being is indeed to let everyone fly. And that's the reason why we've had many recent mega sales. No? We had our trademark piso sale, as well as an 88 peso sale for Halloween. And SEB is back to doing what's best for consumers by making travel affordable. We're particularly happy with the results also of our SEB Super Pass sale. No? So we had one just a few weeks ago, and the consumer response to this product was quite overwhelming. Now, while we are highlighting affordability, the piso sales are not to say that we won't continue to do things that will further build on consumers' confidence to fly and to fly safely. No? Now, we previously disclosed that all of our crew who operate our aircraft are 100% vaccinated. It's important to note that we were able to achieve this without a vaccine mandate in the workplace. Now, our people understand that vaccines work, and each of us must do our part to protect ourselves against infection. We've also further eased the travel process under the new normal. We've taken advantage of the digital tools available to us and consumers today so that travelers can complete all of their transactions online. So wherever you are, whether you're in the comfort of your home or if you're already back at work in the office, as long as you have an internet connection, you can manage your bookings and arrange the services that you need from SEB. No more need to visit a ticketing office. The only thing that consumers will still need to do in the physical world is actually to show up at the airport on time for their flight. Now, the other thing to note is that the policy environment today is indeed more conducive to travel. Just a few months ago, many local governments were imposing numerous travel requirements on passengers. One such difficult requirement was obtaining an RT-PCR test before boarding an aircraft. Now, the RT-PCR test is an expensive requirement. It can easily double or triple the cost of travel. On this slide, we show you how things have changed this year with the gradual opening up and removal of travel restrictions. Earlier in the year, the airports we operated in were quite empty. Travel demand was low, and airport terminals were, in fact, ghost towns. Today, you can see the effect of the opening up. T3 is getting busier, although it's far from being crammed. And we would also like to thank our passengers as they are continuously complying with the social distancing guidelines in place at the various airports. Now, when it comes to the vaccination rollout and the vaccination campaign, we, of course, are not yet done. We, as a society, are not yet done. Even though Metro Manila and the capital region have reached vaccination targets, there is still a lot of work to do to get as many Filipinos immunized as possible. And SEB continues to fully support the national vaccination campaign. We're making our aircraft available to transport the life-saving vaccines wherever they are needed. To date, we have transported more than 30 million doses across the entire Philippines. And we will continue to do our share to support this very vital and important national campaign. Now, all of these developments, the easing of travel restrictions, the ongoing rollout of the vaccination campaign, and the drop in total nationwide cases, COVID cases, means we are seeing a very healthy restoration of travel demand. For December alone, we have scheduled flights that will bring us to about 60% of the capacity that we had in place prior to the pandemic. So while we're not yet fully recovered when it comes to our network, we have seen in recent weeks a dramatic increase compared to where we were throughout most of 2021. In the first half of 2021, we struggled to operate a domestic network that was about 1/4 or even 1/5 the size of the network pre-COVID. But now we're seeing that with a healthy spike in demand, it's there, and we're able to respond accordingly by adding capacity. Again, of note here is that we're not yet fully recovered. As I said, for December, we're only going to be about 60% of our pre-COVID domestic capacity. But we're happy to note that on select routes, the actual demand that we're seeing is higher than what it was before the pandemic struck. So we're highlighting Boracay, Cagayan de Oro, and Tacloban, where the number of flights that we have today for December are actually much higher than what it was before the pandemic. Of course, the big question now is what's in store for 2022? Can this rise in demand be sustained? Everyone is talking about Omicron. It looms on the horizon. Naturally, we're still quite cautiously optimistic about prospects for 2022. One of the drivers for this optimism is really the national vaccination campaign. Last week, we saw the very encouraging news that we were able to get to close to 9 million additional jabs administered in just 3 days. And probably before the end of the week, we will cross over the 100 million mark in terms of total doses, total jabs administered. Our target is still to get to 70% of the total population inoculated. So that means close to 80 million Filipinos to be fully vaccinated. So we're probably about halfway there in terms of the full inoculation. Now, we all know that the vaccines work. They provide us that level of protection so that we can get on with our lives. So, this is in no way saying that we can let our guard down. Even if majority of us are fully vaccinated, we expect that we will continue to have to wear masks so that we further reduce the risk of transmitting the disease. The A330 Neo is the first of its kind in our fleet. Its arrival means that our fleet size expands ever so slightly. We will end 2021 with 76 aircraft in our fleet, 2 more compared to the total at the end of 2020. This small net increase in our fleet size is happening at the end of this year, and it's happening so that we're really prepared and we're well situated for conditions in 2022. The arrival of this A330 Neo aircraft is also an indicator that Cebu Pacific, because of all of the tough actions that we took early in the pandemic, we can continue to invest for the future. At this point, we do want to emphasize that while times have been extremely challenging, we do have to continue our work to transform our fleet. We do want to position our airline for that greener future. The A330 Neo will make us the greenest airline in Asia, as it will have the lowest carbon footprint among aircraft in the world. The other backbone of our fleet are our A321 Neos, and we are in the midst of a fleet refresh now. So by 2027, we expect to be operating only Neo aircraft, no more of the previous generation aircraft. The new aircraft can help us achieve the lowest cost per ASK, as well as the lowest carbon emissions per seat in the world. Now, we do hope to welcome you on board our A330 aircraft soon. But in the meantime, here's a sneak peek of the interiors. The interiors have been redesigned in a manner that we think captures the Filipino spirit of cheerful and clean exuberance. The key piece of equipment in the cabin are our Recaro seats, which are state-of-the-art leather seats with the one amenity that passengers are looking for today, which is charging ports and outlets for their mobile devices. You'll find that the seats are so well crafted that they do provide more legroom compared to the economy seats of other carriers. The Neo, A330 Neo, along with the other aircraft that enter our fleet, will help us meet the anticipated recovery in travel demand in 2022. We are forecasting that for the full year 2022, we will probably be about 84% of our output in 2019 as far as the domestic network is concerned. It will be a slower recovery on the international side. We think that for the full year, we will only be at about 39% of our seats restored compared to 2019. As we have seen in recent months, the international border reopenings will be much slower. Hence, the more subdued recovery when it comes to the international network. In the meantime, we also do want to remind our passengers that even though the number of flights and the number of travelers headed to the airports won't match the numbers of December 2019, it will still be a peak period. It will go much more smoothly if people prepare in advance before their flight. No? So the number one reminder for us is, and for our passengers, is bring your vaccination card. Don't leave home without it. And it's best to have a digital copy of your vaccination records that you can show to authorities now if they ask for it. And wherever you are traveling, mask wearing will continue to be enforced. So probably bring an extra mask all the time. And continue to wear the mask. It's not only done to comply with regulations, but it's really a great personal safety practice that lowers your risk of getting infected. With that, let me pass the mic back to Jude. Over to you, Jude, for the continuation of the event.
Daghang salamat, Alex, for sharing the updates and letting us know firsthand what's in store for Cebu Pacific. In anticipation of peak travel periods, goodness, in 2020 or the last part of 2019, we never thought we'd ever hear that again, but here we are, very hopeful in 2021. And like I said, in anticipation of travel peak periods, we'd like to play this Fly Easy video as a reminder for everyone. Watch this.
Huwag ka nang matakot.
Now, you can go online.
You can fly away, fly with me today. Fly easy, Cebu Pacific, fly easy, fly easy. Going online is fly easy.
My takeaway from that, well, Seb has always been here for its passengers, answering to your needs, whether it's affordability, safety, security. It's great to hear that domestic travel is really starting to recover from this pandemic, and how Seb is completely confident that this recovery will continue and be better in 2022. Alex, I'd like to ask that you stay here as I call on the rest of the panelists for the panel discussion. We have the following joining us today. Of course, the VP for Marketing and Customer Experience of Cebu Pacific Air, my very good friend, Candice Iyog. Hello, Candice.
And hello to
Good
everyone
morning
joining
to
us this
you.
morning. Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. And in just a little bit, joining Alex, Candice, and I, our special guest from Manila International Airport Authority, their General Manager, Sir Eddie Monreal, will be joining us in just a little bit, of course. Alex, you've already talked about peak travel reminders. I'm thrilled about listening to the fact that Cebu Pacific Air is now the greenest airlines in the Philippines. Is that claim? Well, I claimed it now. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, that's correct, Jude. We're quite proud of having that the A330 Neo enter our fleet. No, our data shows that it's going to really be the greenest aircraft in the world because of the way we've configured the aircraft in terms of the carbon emissions per seat and per passenger kilometer traveled. It will indeed have the lowest carbon footprint. No? So we've signed up for 16 of these aircraft. They will be delivered in the decade ahead. No? So we're quite happy that it is entering the fleet. It does help us achieve all of our own goals as well. No? Not just to lower our carbon footprint, but also just to provide really efficient and low-cost travel services to the traveling public. So big important step for us to take forward, to introduce this this brand new technology. You know, the A330 Neos have, as they say, it's the new engine option. So the technology behind those engines allows us as the airline to actually deliver this lower cost proposition as well as a lower greenhouse gas emissions to the traveling public.
This is just me being personally curious about it because I've never been inside a Neo 330. How is the comfort inside? I'm assuming you've already been inside one. How is the ride like?
Very similar to when we introduced the A330 into our fleet about 8 years ago, the first generation, the A330 CEO. At that time, people were saying, "Hey, it's 436 seats. That's a lot of seats in the cabin." But because of the way we actually laid out the interiors, because of the seat selection that we also settled on, you know, when people actually got on board, they were pleasantly surprised to say, "Hey, it's actually it feels so wide, and there's so much space for the passengers." And then at the passenger level, when you actually sit down on the seats, you'll find that there's the leg room, the clearance between your knee and the next seat in front of you is actually much better compared to all of the other economy class cabins. No? So there's a lot of thinking and design work behind this to produce this kind of cabin that just feels it feels fantastic. No? So it's you can right away feel that the difference in terms of the cabin comfort as well as just the whole the feel behind the entire cabin.
Ako, aasahan ko yan, Sir Alex. Sabi mo, fantastic. Pag fantastic talaga. I look forward to being inside one of the cabins of the A330 Neo. I'm going to ask you some more questions that our audience have thrown in through our chat. But before that, we're now joined by Manila International Airport Authority's General Manager, Sir Eddie Monreal. Sir Eddie, good morning. Magandang araw po sa inyo.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm trying to figure out my audio right now, but
we
I can hear you loud right now.
Yes, we can hear you as well. Sir Eddie, I'm going to jump right in and ask you a question if that's okay with you.
Well,
you can hear me now, right?
I can answer your questions. That's
okay,
fine.
I'm pretty sure you can. Because, you know, there are some key changes that the MIAA has implemented to prepare for peak travel period. I mentioned earlier that we never thought we would hear peak travel period again, given what happened in 2019 and 2020. But now we're very optimistic. What are the key changes that MIAA has put in for, well, optimistically peak travel period?
Well, to be honest with you, MIA is basically just providing the facility. It is a composite team who does the changes in reference to the guidance of IATF. That's basically a compliance of what is being given to us. The main leader in this process is basically the one-stop shop together with BOQ. It's a composite team together with PCG. Manila International Airport is just in support, but we are trying our best to cooperate whatever in any way that we could.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, what are your reminders for the traveling public this December? Because we're anticipating that there will be a pickup in traffic for travel come December, January, God willing, new variants coming in, and then there's really an uptake also in vaccinations, which is always good. What do we want to remind the traveling public?
Well, first of all, allow me to thank the people, our Filipinos, for complying with the vaccination requirements. In that way, it will open up our tourism, it will open up our economy. Together with them, we'll be able to surpass this pandemic. But again, just a simple reminder, let's not forget about the minimum health standard that everyone and all the government agencies are espousing, that we should all cooperate. If we're required to go through vaccination, let's have it. It's free. It's being reached out to all the citizenry because of that's the effort of our president and the government. We should comply so that we'll be able to have this normal life soon. However, there's another threat with Omicron. Again, I would like to emphasize that we should maintain the minimum health standard that's being required. It's a good news that local tourism, the other local governments are now relaxing the requirements. That will help our local carriers to mount additional flights so that we'll be able to start up our economy. That's basically what I really want to ask our people, our passengers passing through the airport.
Minimum health standards. Even if we keep repeating it, we'll never get tired because it still remains in place. I will
That's
be
correct, ma'am.
asking you about Omicron in just a little bit, sir, no? But I'd like to ask this question of Candice. How is travel demand catching up to additional capacity in December? Again, this is cautious optimism for all of us. Could you please share more about Cebu Pacific's digital initiatives? Alex mentioned them earlier that all you need to do really is just to physically, all you need to do physically is just to show up in time for your flight at the airport. As in, fly easy with contactless flights. Please tell us more about this.
Thanks, Jude. And once again, good morning to everyone. As Alex updated us earlier, no, our December capacity, we're expecting to be at 60% of our pre-COVID levels by December. The good news is we are seeing additional capacity being absorbed by the market quite quickly. And this is really a sign of travel confidence returning. It's a sign of, I guess you can say it's a sign of optimism from the traveling public, possibly also with higher vaccination rates. People are more comfortable now traveling. I have had the chance to travel last week for a work trip, no? Went to Bacolod.
I envy you.
Yeah. It's good to see that it almost feels like it's back to normal with a few differences. No, people are wearing masks. People are more careful about not sitting beside people within the airport. No, but generally speaking, I guess if you everything is relative. No, if we compare it to last year, it's definitely picked up significantly. Now, there are changes in our digital efforts. So Alex talked about the reminders earlier to ensure an easier travel experience. I think the reminder is really approach travel with maybe a little bit of change in mindset. No, that's one. To approach travel expecting that things will be exactly the way they were before the pandemic might set you up for a little disappointment. Right?
Yes.
So let's approach it first with that an open mindset, thinking that okay, things have changed, so let's just approach it with that level of openness. Be prepared. Part of the preparation is being aware of what the LGU requirements are for your destination. And second is just go digital. No? So that's the push, because digital is now part of safety. Digital payments, digital check-in, digital
booking.
Purchases of booking, digital purchases of your baggage or your prepaid baggage. No, be sure that you are within your weight limits, so that when you get to the airport, all you have to do is print your bag tags. So we've gone digital as well on self-printing of bag tags and attaching it onto your bag. So it lessens your face-to-face contact with our frontliners, because I think that's one of the things that we know people are a little more, wary of, close in-person contact. So we've put in place a lot of these new processes that help rebuild the trust and confidence in air travel.
I've experienced all of those in other airports in the world, and I keep asking myself, when is this going to become a reality in the Philippines? And like we mentioned, this really has changed the way we travel. So now it's a reality here in the Philippines. championed, of course, by Cebu Pacific Air. I'm going to go back to Alex and ask him about the aircraft because we have questions right before we open it to questions from our audience. How many aircraft is expected to arrive by 2022? I understand that there are A330 Neos, there are A321 Neo, and an A320 Neo. And how many in terms of number are coming in?
Sure. Let me, I don't have the number off the top of my head, the exact number. But just to put in context, like for our order book, the A330 Neos, what we've done is we've maintained that order book. So I mentioned that the original order was for 16 of the A330 Neos. No, so that's still coming. What we've done is we've spaced out some of the near-term deliveries as well. No, as I mentioned earlier on, we're expecting like on the international side. That there's going to be a much slower recovery. The A330 Neos are really geared towards flying the longer sectors now, the ones going to Dubai or Australia, or even the 4 or 5 hour sectors that are available to us in Asia. No? So we don't expect the demand to recover as quickly on these international routes. Therefore, we don't need some of those A330 Neos in the short term. But in the long term, we definitely are still planning for them to come into our fleet so they can continue to deliver this lower cost proposition network-wide.
We're now opening our question Q&A forum to our audience. And we have, as you mentioned earlier, Alex, that it might be slower to recover when you're talking about international travel. But we already have a question from Eleanor Palima from DOT Australia. And she's asking, I am interested to know when Cebu Pacific will resume its flights to Australia. And information on capacity and frequency of flights will also be appreciated.
Yeah, sure. We're definitely interested in restoring the services to Australia. No? But realistically, also, we're probably at least a year away before we can actually restore the flights. In normal times, it's really it takes us a long time to actually build up the bookings on a particular route. No? So we always want to launch the flight, so to speak, and put it on sale way ahead, 6 months to a year in advance of the actual start of the services. And that's for normal times. We anticipate that because of the new normal conditions, because there's still quite a lot of restrictions, border restrictions in place, there's a little bit of a hesitancy for consumers to plan that far in advance, like a year ahead for their international travel plans. So that's the conditions that we have. So even if the border is already wide open for both sides, because the other consideration that we have to put up with is there may be open borders on one side, but there's still closed borders, or there's still quarantine restrictions on the return leg, on going to another country or coming back to your home country. So because of all of these ongoing sort of new normal conditions with regards to international travel, we're really anticipating that it's going to take us much longer to actually put back the flights. So in the case of Australia, yeah, we're probably at least a year away from actually resuming the services into Australia. But our interest is still to restore the flights that we had, both Sydney as well as Melbourne.
Thank you so much. I hope that that answered the question of DOT Australia sent in by Eleanor Palima. I want to ask this of Candice. With travel restrictions generally easing up, and this is a good thing, more destinations are opening up, of course, for leisure travel. I know that December 1, we were all ready to open up, and then the news of Omicron came in. How should, in anticipation, how should the travel and tourism industry prepare and adjust for this?
Very good question, and thanks, Jude. I think in the same way that this pandemic has been a burning platform for digitalization and change, not just for Cebu Pacific, but for the industry, even for the even for payments, what we've done as an airline is also put in place systems and processes that allow us to be more nimble. Because as we know, and if you read all of these reports on the pandemic, people always say Omicron is probably not going to be the last variant that will come up. And so
True,
these things
unfortunately,
so these things will continue to evolve until there is zero COVID. There will always be mutations of the variant of COVID in circulating, no? And so aside from the digital efforts, we've focused a lot of our time and our energy around building systems and processes that will allow us to be more agile and really nimble to adjust to these to the uncertainties and to changes in the operating environment. We've always felt that we were a very agile airline already, even before the pandemic. But this experience over the past 20 months has really put to test our, agility. It became agile at scale, and so it was difficult in the first few months. We've had to make a lot of difficult decisions, but I'd like to think that we've put in place more processes and systems now that are going to make us stronger as we come out of it, and still give us the flexibility to adjust for whatever is to come.
Which is probably why people always preface a description of what has happened as unprecedented. We never really knew that something of this scale happened. And are we still confident in saying that, yes, we are an agile airline?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the situation in itself is unprecedented for sure. No, pandemic. I mean, yes, but our ability for change is not. Our skills are not. We have gone through challenges in our history, and the skills we've picked up in this process, we continue to use. The skills that we are picking up from this pandemic, we will use long into our future. So yes, it's unprecedented as a use case or as an experience or as an event, but our ability and adaptability to change is not.
I want to ask this actually of GM Monreal, but okay, he's back. GM Eddie, are you back on? I want to ask this question of you. I was speaking to an IATF representative last week, and they were explaining to me that the Philippines actually has a 4-door policy when it comes in. So it's really very strict when it comes to allowing tourists or returning OFWs back into the country or returning Filipinos. And as the gateway basically to the Philippines, I want to ask GM Eddie, in terms of Candice mentioned that this Omicron variant will not be definitely the last variant that comes in. Certain mutations, of course, are expected to come in. We're glad that there's an uptake on vaccination, of course. But Sir Eddie, are there any particular changes in the airport that we are putting in place specifically for Omicron variant, or if we expect new variants to come in, just so our public is reassured, sir? No, I think we lost GM just a bit. I'm going to ask this to Alex or to Candice. What is SEB doing specifically to address, first of all, of course, because it's the variant that's of concern now, the Omicron variant, which I would like to remind the public that there still is no local transmission of it, although we're being careful, cautiously optimistic about it. We're careful about it. But what is Cebu Pacific doing specifically to address the Omicron variant and the ones that are coming after that?
I think and Lance mentioned this in his update as well, Alex as well. We're looking at, again, part of that, putting systems in place to prepare us for all of these uncertainties. One is pushing really hard on vaccinations, whether it's vaccination of our employee base, our active crew, who are now 100% vaccinated. It's also supporting our government's vaccination campaign, or Ingat Angat Bakuna Lahat program, through communication, through shipment or through cargo support for the vaccines. So that's one, no? Because we all know vaccination is one of the important, solutions to the pandemic. Digital, we've talked about that. Really being very conscious about communicating to the public the safety measures when traveling, because we're in one ecosystem, right? We can only do our part of disinfecting the aircraft and providing a touchless, contactless experience. But the other part where we will need the cooperation so that we can be successful together would be from our passengers. You've mentioned this, wearing masks, checking in online, being mindful of how you travel again, right? I've always said this, parang people think about the return to travel with that revenge travel energy. And I think
I feel that brewing inside me.
I know, but I think it's
Revenge
more
travel.
Yeah, but I think the excitement is good. The revenge or wanting to go back with throwing caution to the wind part, not really, right? Because I think when we go back to travel, we have to be mindful not just of our own behavior, but how we will impact the people around us. So yeah, I don't know, Alex, do you have anything further to add?
I think, Jude, that one of the things to emphasize really is this communication, because conditions will change. I mean, whether it's Omicron or a new variant, conditions are going to change all the time. And therefore, even the local governments themselves will continue to evolve and change their policies and how to actually cope and deal with whatever comes through. No? So I think it's very important for us to continuously provide sort of the current and most up-to-date information to our passengers so that they can make their own sort of risk assessment of the situation. It's almost like weather. Parang we're on an annual basis, Philippines expects 20 typhoons to come through, right? And there's forecasts that sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 25, sometimes it's super typhoons, sometimes it's benign typhoons. But that information is shared by Pagasa so that people can make their own sort of travel plans. Similarly, that's probably how it's going to play out now that we expect that COVID will be sort of endemic in society. So it's up to each and every single individual to really make their own risk assessment of the situation. Is there an ongoing outbreak in a community that you want to travel to? So do you postpone your travel plans or do you continue with it because it's really critical travel for you to go to that particular city? So I think that's the way forward, is to really keep up to date with the ever-changing landscape, and for us as the airline to really provide the up-to-date, verified information to the traveling public as quick as we can.
I want to ask this of GM Eddie very quickly. GM Eddie, as restrictions are getting lower, of course, there'll be a pickup on travel. What are we expecting the volume at MIAA to look like come December and in the following months, GM Eddie? And what are we doing to prepare for that? GM, can you hear us? Hey, GM. Can you hear us now? We're just checking if GM Eddie can hear us. He had trouble with his audio earlier. GM Eddie? Well, we'll get back to that later on. So, Alex, there are several questions being thrown at you from our audience. I'll go at one at once. Number one, how big will the network be at least for the first sem of 2022, assuming COVID cases are under control? Second question, does SAB expect to return to profitability in 2022?
Okay, on the profitability question, that one, I don't think we were allowed to provide because of all of the PSC restrictions. But in terms of the size of the network, earlier on we gave sort of the forecast and what we're expecting in terms of the recovery of our network. So clearly on the domestic side, we're going to be, the recovery is going to be much faster, much quicker. We said we're expecting about 84% of the total output for 2022 to be about 84% of what it was in 2019 as far as the domestic network is concerned. So that gives you a size of what we think, size and scope of what we think the recovery is going to look like. But clearly we're expecting that in some months we'll actually be back to the levels that we saw in 2019 on a month-on-month comparison. So probably by middle of 2022, we expect that we'll be operating a similar size network as far as the domestic flights are concerned as it was in 2 years ago. But on the international side, yeah, it's going to be so much slower that we're expecting only about 4/10 of the size of the network in 2022 compared to what it was in 2019.
Thank you very much. Maybe just one final question. In light of recent events, while we're waiting for GM to come in, because I'm dying to ask him about the traffic situation, the foot traffic situation in MIAA. How else can the traveling public, how else can they help out with the situation with SEB, for example? How can we cooperate with each other more? GM,
I can take that. Oh, there you go.
Wait, sorry. GM, can you hear us now?
No, unfortunately, I have a very minimal volume coming from your end. I've been trying all my phone,
but we
my
can hear
iPad
you
already, but seems there's something wrong with the volume of the conversation. I've been listening in, but unfortunately, I could barely hear anything.
Can you hear us now, Secretary? Secretary today. GM Eddie, I have a question for you, GM Eddie. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very little. Go ahead.
Okay. We just want to ask you, how do you expect the volume of foot traffic to increase in MIAA come December and the following months? And what are we doing to prepare for that, GM?
Well, in terms of foot traffic, I just give you a reference. Pre-pandemic, we are barely operating on about 15% passenger load. So in terms of volume, we can easily cope up, especially the domestic travel. Since there's no restriction on the inbound and outbound for domestic, we're okay. The only concern right now is basically the inbound for international. If you're hearing me, is the restriction on the inbound, which is only pegged at 4,000 per day because of the requirements and processes being implemented by one-stop shop and the One Health Pass, which requires a little bit tedious, but they're now into automating the processes so that will help us hopefully increase the numbers. But again, that will depend on the number of our quarantine facilities that's tied up with that, because we're now implementing a 5-day protocol of quarantine requirement. Unlike before this COVID, Omicron, we were already able to shorten it to 3 days facility quarantine. So that's basically the issue right now. But at the moment, 4,000 is being allowed for inbound. I hope you heard me.
Yes, we heard you loud and clear. Thank you so much, GM. I cut Candice very quickly before that. So Candice, go ahead. How can the traveling public, cooperate more? And how can this be more fruitful for us?
I think one is let's make sure that the contact information provided in your booking record is updated, right? There might be changes to bookings, changes to, say, restrictions, etc. The single most important data point is in your booking record is your phone number, your mobile number. Make sure it's updated so that we can contact you should there be changes to the flight. That's one. Second, and this is a little bit, I wouldn't say controversial, but it's one of these things that have come up several times, no, especially during the pandemic, is false documents. That's as much as possible. That's the best way also you can cooperate. No, if you are traveling to a destination that requires you to present an RT-PCR, a vaccination card, an S-Pass, whatever it is, let's make sure that we comply and we present authentic documents, right? No fake RT-PCRs, fake vax cards, fake, these things, we understand naman, no? It's not, that part of it is one of the new, so far, it's a new requirement. For us to make sure that the process is easy, we will trust the documents that are presented to us. No, we are not, our frontliners are not going to be reviewing them with looking at it like money or like cash. It's not. So we will trust. But if passengers get to the destination and the destination says they're fake or whatever, all of these things, that's where passengers are either denied entry or sent back to origin, or all of these things. And the bigger impact there is new restrictions will be put in place, or possibly stricter, again, requirements or screening processes to prevent these things. So the second one is really, let's make sure we're presenting authentic documents. Let's avoid false documents altogether. Check in online. Make sure that you have the right baggage allowance. So if you prepaid for a 20-kilo bag, just bring a 20-kilo bag. If you think you're going to exceed, then purchase a 32-kilo bag, etc. All of those things. We are doing our best to inform the public as often as possible when it comes to changes or what to expect. What else? I think those are the few things that are off the top of my head.
Like you said, it's really a change in mindset. So with that, we would like to thank our panelists for today. Earlier, we were joined by GM Eddie Monreal of MIAA. I'd like to thank, of course, Candice and Alex of Cebu Pacific Air. Daghang salamat for giving us all of that information. If there are any more questions that you would like to ask specifically of any of them, please leave them at our chat box, and our Cebu Pacific personnel will get in touch with you on how to relay all of your questions. As we come to a close, let's all listen to this inspiring message from the Secretary of the Philippine Department of Tourism, Secretary Bernadette Romulo-Puyat.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to take part in this travel industry stakeholder event. We know very well that the travel and tourism industry has been the hardest hit by the pandemic. Nonetheless, it is also this same industry that has the potential to bounce back and contribute to national recovery the most. In 2020, the total number of foreign tourists was 1.32 million, an 84% plunge from the 8.26 million in 2019. During the tourism industry's peak in 2019, it contributed 12.8% of the country's GDP and employed 5.72 million Filipinos. Following the pandemic, tourism accounted for just 5.4% of the country's gross domestic product, its lowest level since 2002, when the figure stood at 5.6%. Meanwhile, employment in Philippine tourism was estimated at 4.68 million in 2020, lower by 18.1% than in 2019. But we in the Department of Tourism believe that our days of despair are over, as we've seen many encouraging signs in the last few weeks. This includes the continually dropping COVID case numbers, the easing of alert levels and restrictions on mobility, and even the lessening of quarantine days for fully vaccinated Filipinos returning from overseas. In spite of this, we know the recovery won't come overnight. Since the start of the pandemic, both the airline industry and our tourism stakeholders have shared the idea that our recovery will not come at the expense of tourists and of our workers. We had to do things slowly, surely, and responsibly, as safeguarding everyone's health became our number one priority. I've also taken the view that the DOT strategies for recovery would need a multilateral approach to work. And it's why we've always valued inputs from our partners in the national and local government, private stakeholders, tourism workers, and community representatives. On that note, I would like to thank Cebu Pacific for being a staunch partner of the Department of Tourism. Your signature piece of fare promos have been a tremendous help to keeping Filipinos inspired to travel locally amidst the pandemic, which formed the backbone of our recovery strategy. And even before this crisis, 5J was a solid partner in promoting greater sustainability in our industry. Today, tourism in the new normal can no longer just be about visitor numbers and short-term economic gains. Instead, we must focus on providing guests with high-quality experiences and practicing sustainability and inclusive growth for the tourism industry and the communities that depend on it. With like-minded partners such as Cebu Pacific, our vision for a better tourism industry stands a stronger chance of soon becoming a reality. Together, we can shape Philippine tourism to become more sustainable, inclusive, globally competitive, and of course, more fun than anywhere else in the world. Thank you very much and mabuhay.
Thank you very much, Secretary Berna, for that insightful message. And I love the Kenneth Cabuanpue little people mini version lamp right behind her. I have the maxi version here right behind me, proudly made in Cebu. Thank you for that message to our travel partners. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us here today as we update you on what's latest as we recover all together. We in the travel industry, of course, continue to work hard for Filipino travelers, from reopening more destinations for leisure travel to making travel simpler and easier for all, on top of providing more flight options and flexible bookings, to reopening safe and comfortable rooms for their stays, to providing exciting but safe tour experiences. The list literally goes on. We're looking forward to a more hopeful 2022 and are in fact again, hopeful that things are looking bright for the travel industry. This is the modern day bayanihan we're experiencing as we rediscover the Philippines once again and encourage everyone to travel again. Daghang salamat. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.